Why did his reaction to your August 2011 crash really mean a lot to you?
Well, for me, I was sitting in the car, and I just wrecked really, really hard. And at that point, I could feel my legs, but I knew that it didn't feel right. And I was in extreme pain in my lower back. I was just tingling like hell. When I first started moving, I was really scared that, I'd lost some movement in my, lower body. And, I looked over at that moment while I was in pain, and there was a car parked next to me. And it was Dale Earnhardt Jr. He had been testing at the same track, and he was on track when I wrecked. And my car was parked parallel to the racetrack, was just where the resting position was. And Dale had pulled up like this. And, the edge of the track was right here. He'd pulled up. And at that point, I didn't know how I was going to get out of the car because I just had zero strength. I was a wet noodle. And my car was running at full sound. When it wrecked, the engine had lodged itself in a position to where it was running at full speed. But the drivetrain wasn't engaged, so obviously it wasn't moving. And so I remember reaching over, shutting the car off. And when I did, the switch was right over here. I saw him out of the corner of my eye. And I could see his helmet and his shield, and he was looking at me like this. He was just staring. And he wasn't moving. He wasn't getting out. His car was stopped, he was stopped, and it was just, like you and I talking right here, just staring me down. And I was in a lot of pain. I couldn't move. And I remember, yelling at him to come help me. He couldn't hear me. I remember yelling at him to come help me. And he just stayed there. Stayed there. And eventually, the track safety crew came up and started to help me. And I started to get the feeling back in my legs and realized my ankle was, not in great condition. Which at that point was really secondary compared to everything else. And the next thing I know, Jimmie had, pulled up to the scene in a rental car. He took a rental car from the pit lane and drove over there. And, that stark contrast, his ability to understand the moment and understand that the severity of what was going on, and overcome, I think, the fear that every driver has, which is seeing another driver hurt, and care more about the person than his own reflections of mortality. I think that really meant something to me. I guess that was a long story, but.
Have you talked to him about it since?
Not really. I mean, I saw him, and we talked about, I guess you would say the CSI stuff, the crash and what happened, and, the marks, and, things like that, but not the actual, not his actual presence. How about that?
Your next to last restart at Texas in 2012, you force Jimmie Johnson high into the rubble to the point where it seemed like both of you almost lose control. Explain the situation and the thinking at that point.
Well, afterwards, I think Jimmie summed it up pretty well. It was a high-stakes game of chicken, which at that point in the season, the championship was on the line. He knew it. I knew it. And I had to send a message that I wasn't going to blink.
But take me to that moment when, you're kind of teetering on the edge of losing control. What are you thinking about?
I'm thinking he better give me room or he's going with me. That's what I
Really?
was thinking, yeah. And he did. He was smart enough to know that, which is really impressive. But either way, I had to send a message that I was serious.
How do you view Jimmie Johnson?
I think of him as, one of the most balanced race car drivers, probably the most balanced race car driver we've ever seen in the sport. He's not really, I'm trying to measure my words here. He's good in every category. Every category. Mental strength, physical strength, talent, leadership qualities. All those things and on, He's good at every category. He's the most balanced driver the sport has ever seen.